This is a University of Otago podcast.
Hello and welcome to Otago University Vote Chat 2011. The idea behind Vote Chat is to get along campaigning politicians and get them to tell us why we should vote for them, find out a bit about their background beliefs and have a bit of interaction because we're in a studio audience here. We've got a studio audience here and hopefully they'll have some questions, some responses, maybe even some heckling. We're trying to encourage that because I feel that in New Zealand politics people are way too polite and too reserved. So hopefully they'll come up with something. Certainly feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. Okay, and we're trying to make this quite interactive. This is streaming out on the internet as we speak. It will also be available on YouTube and downloadable as a podcast on iTunes. So, and people are following this on Twitter using the hashtag OUVoteChat2011. So hopefully we'll be able to follow some of that as well. We've got Joe Stockman over in the corner here. Joe is honours student in politics and also a journalist for the student newspaper Critic, and we'll come back to him soon. Okay, so today's guest really needs no introduction, so I'm not going to introduce you, but it's Winston Peters, and I'm really glad to have you here. I think you should be in Parliament. Not because I'd vote for you, sorry, but...
There's nobody perfect.
No, but I think it's pretty unfair that you're not in Parliament. You've got a party that got 4% of the vote back in 2008, and you're the sort of, ideological diversity we need in Parliament. It's becoming too boring. We need people like Winston Peters there, so really I just want to talk today about, the main issue is why... What's going to stop you coming back? What's going to stop Winston Peters and New Zealand First coming back? What are the barriers that you need to get over? So I'll hand it over to you and you can sort of say something about what are you up against?
If we get a fair go in this campaign, New Zealand First will be back in big numbers. By a fair go, I mean that we get a fair representation of what we stand for, proper coverage of meetings which we have, and some of our meetings have been huge, even in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Meetings of 800 people, 500 people in Christchurch just on Wednesday. We're being sort of Cinderella-ized, but we understand the environment which we are campaigning, and we're going to carry on, and I think we'll do well in 2011. So the only thing that can stop us coming back is the kind of filthy character assassination campaign that ran for 5 months in 2008, with 3 investigations being the result of MP allegations, all of which came up with nothing. The Serious Fraud Office, the police, the Electoral Commission. And at the end of the day, there was nothing, but it did enormous damage. But that said, New Zealand First got well over 4%, but we don't want a 4% threshold. We believe in the 5% threshold. And if the rules are 5% and you fail, don't moan about it. And that's where we stand on the issue.
Well, I accept that you haven't, and I've been a bit surprised about this. So you actually think a 5% threshold is a good thing?
Yes, I do. It's a difficult threshold because unlike other countries where it's state by state, this is nationwide. Yeah. I admit it's a difficult threshold, but the greatest difficulty with our threshold is not the threshold or the system. It is that the media of this country have refused to accommodate the wish of the public, which is MMP or proportional representation. They keep writing articles. They keep on imaging the political system as being first past the post when it is not.
Okay, but you can't complain about a lack of media coverage, can you? I mean,
this is exactly
what you're saying, that you had 5 months of media coverage prior to the last election.
No, a deliberate character assassination organised by political parties and other interests is not coverage.
But
and Otago University, unusually, and to their credit, have produced in 2 elections reports saying that where the media coverage of New Zealand First has been concerned, it has been biased and discriminatory in the extreme. Now, these are not my findings.
Sure.
They're the independent findings of a highly academic group from Otago University.
But any publicity is good publicity. I mean, we know New Zealand First loves publicity. You want any sort of publicity.
No. Look, dirt publicity is not good publicity. With the greatest respect, I'm not a pop star. We're in politics where integrity, ethics, and beliefs and ideology count. They're serious. For 24/7, it affects people's lives. So all you ask for is fair representation of what you're saying, not distortion and half-truth.
Okay. I mean, I'm really interested in this media stuff, but I don't want to let this threshold thing go by yet. It seems amazing. You, to me, seem the epitome of what's wrong with the threshold. It seems totally anti-democratic that if a population, 4% of them vote for a party like yours, you should be represented. So it seems there shouldn't even be a threshold, in my view. I mean, why? How can you possibly
you've got to have a threshold.
it?
You've got to have a threshold. Otherwise, you have what you have in Israel, where it's about 1.3%, I think it is.
Yeah.
And you've got all sorts of parties in Parliament, all sorts of factions, which drag the system down. There should be some ability to be cohesive. Now, look, I can live with 4%. What I'm saying to you was, the fact that we didn't make 5 is no reason for us to start arguing 4. We knew what the rules were,
they would look rather
and we didn't make it, and my party and I have said not a word about it, and still support the 5%.
Okay.
It's called honour.
Yep, honour, okay. So the media...
Not a big commodity amongst some of the other parties, I might add, but never mind.
Okay, so the media, after decades of experience, what's your lessons about the media? I mean, you live by them, basically, don't you? So you need them, but... what's the state of the media?
Well, it's a tragedy in this country, and it's almost self-fulfilling, but when you have the mass import of foreign ownership of the media, and then new guidelines and new rules, the principal one of which is to suffocate them from resources to do their job properly, what you get is what you got now. So investigative journalism has been killed. As a career, it's almost dead on the water, unless you can see yourself going offshore. And the industry is under a serious, in my view, performance cloud, not of their own making, although you'd think they'd be more conscious of it. But I've seen the media go from a very highly effective, important institution in democracy to what you've got now. And it's not all their fault.
Okay.
They've been starved from the resources and the ability to do good jobs in the way you see international media, and even small countries like Ireland or Norway, and even Singapore do.
Okay. Who does a good job in New Zealand political reporting, do you think?
Well, there's some excellent reporters, but there are some who are not. And I don't want to personalise this, as you well know.
Oh, I do, but nonetheless, okay.
Well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of an extraordinary, talented journalist who has been, in my view, seriously under-discovered or under-recognised. It's a woman called Jane Clifton, who has got a magnificent turn of phrase, a tremendous imagery, and a brain and ability. And what's underpinning that sort of talent in this country? Or to encourage some young woman looking at her as a model to say, I'll go for that sort of job.
I agree.
There's one for a start.
Is she biased? Because a lot of people think she's pretty biased.
Well, if you live with a cabinet minister in the National Party, you probably are a bit biased, wouldn't you be?
So that doesn't discount her in your view, though?
No, not necessarily. I think she's probably got the capacity to get above that. And given who she's living with, she's probably got a far better brain, and so I do not think that she'd be over-influenced.
Okay, we've got some questions coming from the audience. First, we've got Nikki Lomax, who's a politics honours student.
I just have a question. A few weeks ago, last week, we had Claire Curran here, and she was talking about Labour Party broadcasting policy. In terms of your opinions of the media, do you think there's a role for the government to play in trying to fix those problems? So, like nationalising a television station or even a press association or something like that? I mean, how you can complain about the media, but are there solutions?
Yes, most profoundly. If you want, in an evolving culture that is now being imposed upon by a massive immigration in historical terms from all over the world, if you want to see an evolving culture have a chance to emerge, then the media, then a state-owned media is critical. The converse of that is the lowest common denominator cultural drivel which you see emanate from the United States, and that's the last thing we want. So there's a place for the ABC, there's a place for the BBC equivalent in New Zealand.
So what would New Zealand First do about it?
Well, we'd make sure that both TVNZ and Radio New Zealand were properly funded with a board that understood broadcasting and not being political sycophants, doing the job for the public and the culture,
can't be talking about
not politicians.
Richard Griffin, surely.
Oh, well, he's the last one that's been put on there, and you can't call him that, no. But look at the record. Over the years, one after the other, stacked the board with people who have been more concerned about their political longevity than the public good broadcasting. But I'm getting beyond politics by saying, if you want the escalator to evolve a brilliant culture here in the South Pacific, then this aspect of the media is essential, and you cannot leave it to the so-called marketeers or free marketers or the so-called capitalists, which in this country have a pretty tawdry record anyway, to think you're going to get an outcome. Because the outcome will be what you've seen abroad, which is awful, lowest common denominator nonsense.
Okay. Joe Stockman, critic,
You have a
journalist.
question from the Twitter feed, Mr. Peters. Just wondering, you've been in Parliament or in and out of Parliament for nearly 30 years now. You're the longest serving leader of a party. At what point does that age and experience actually become a barrier to entering into Parliament again?
Are you asking if he's too old?
The Twitter feed is...
All right, okay. Who looks youngest, Nick Smith or me?
Well, you could ask the same question as Nick Smith.
This is a two-way conversation. Who looks youngest, Nick Smith or me?
I would give you that one.
Righto. Don Brash. He makes me look young. Now, look, age is not... age is only an impediment if you're allowed to be. And I look at the burgeoning, dynamic economies of the world, mainly in Asia, and who's running them? Mainly people with experience who know what they're doing and who are not there learning on the job. That's what I promise to do.
So you're talking to an audience of people probably average age 21 or something. Are they too young to get into politics?
No, I've got a candidate. We've got a candidate coming up who's probably as young as anybody in this room. He's a guy who's standing in Wellington Central, bright, sharp, got a lot of... Ben Craven's his name, got a lot of talent. He'll go a long way.
Okay.
And we'll have 2 or 3 more like that when we finally announce the list.
Speaking of your candidates, we've got one here in the audience,
Yes.
the candidate for New Zealand
Randall
First
Ratner, which is a very famous Maori name, and
do you want to stand up and
politics.
So, can you tell us about yourself?
Hello everybody, I'm Randall Ratner. I've lived in the Otago region my entire life. I'm originally from Tapanui. I joined New Zealand First back in 2009 because we didn't make it in and I wanted to help the party get back in, so I stood as a candidate. Yeah.
Any questions for Randall then, about South Dunedin? Some of you must live in the south, no? No? Okay, well feel free to come back to Randall during the next half hour. Okay.